Hey guys, it's Feedback Friday. I am Liana. And this week, surprisingly, the Mountain Monday video was the most viewed so far. And Thursday videos tend to get short shrift here because, they have less time for people to watch them. But Mountain Monday videos tend to be the lowest rated video of any given week. I do them because I find them fun to do. And the people that enjoy the Mountain Monday videos really enjoy them. I get people on Twitter and Facebook and things like that saying, don't forget to breathe and breathe in and breathe out and find your mountain. So it's become quotable, and it's one of those things that has, intangible impact on people. So I keep doing it even though the numbers aren't as good as some of the others. This one was, of course, I was saying, when game reviewers get it wrong, more contentious title, and so I guess more people watched. So now I have the challenge ahead of me that I have to find a way to keep the content of Mountain Monday similar, but make it more relevant to sort of get people in based on something that is the complete opposite of Zen. I'll work on it. I don't know how that's going to go. If in doubt, I'm going to err on the side of maintaining the integrity of the segment and not worrying overly much about specific, traffic counts. I am going to have to start worrying more about the traffic on this channel. Next week is going to be the beginning of sort of a more organized build for my YouTube. It's sort of been determined by some smart people who are good at business, far better at business than me, that there's value here, and we need to start treating it seriously. So I don't do real good at serious, but I'm gonna give it a shot, and give yourself over to the process, kind of like Zen. But this isn't about that. This is about Feedback Friday. And the thing I liked about the comments in this video was most of them actually talked about the topic. There were some, how do I say this? Delicately? There were some people that didn't get it, who commented to vent their spleen, but that was okay on this video because it didn't derail the conversation into a giant bash fest. Unfortunately, the funny little video I did praising Jennifer Hale brought out some pretty confusing haters, and I'm not going to focus on people who just show up to go, this voice actress isn't as good, this voice actress is better, or this is what she's good at, this is what she's not good at. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. It doesn't matter who you are as a performer. Everyone has what they're good at. And I want to focus on the good in that case. I am not going to get pulled in to people just wanting to dump on something because they think something's better. You can think something's better without thinking something's bad, guys. Like, seriously. It's possible. You can say, I personally like this better, but yeah, this is still good. I'm, great that you like stuff. I'm all about liking stuff. And this would make for a very short Feedback Friday video, except for a few tweets I got over the week. And I'm not showing the comments this week. And this is something that I struggle with every single time, is some people get very evidence. I have to see all the evidence firsthand. And so they want the specific tweet or the specific comment or whatever, or the specific person called out that I'm referencing. I'm not personally comfortable with that because I deal with examining ideas, not attacks on people. And so you guys are just going to have to trust me that what I basically have here is I have a second screen. I have a second computer open here where I look at the comment I'm referring to make sure I quote it correctly. So I'm not going to show it on the screen because that, and I'm not even going to do a screen cap with the name erased because then people do a word search. Twitter's exceptionally searchable. It's very easy to find this stuff. And my intent is never to attack the person. It's to look at the idea. And I've just determined that it's not worth showing the tweet and possibly getting someone upset because it's funny, people leave these absolutely scathing comments on my YouTube and then they react very badly when I share them, which is funny because it's a public medium. But I'm not interested in getting into a pissing contest with someone who can't handle criticism of their criticism, you know. But one of those criticisms this week led me to realize that I guess I need to be more clear about what I'm doing with these feedback segments. And I want to go into that via a very interesting article somebody else linked me to. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Haidt, the moral psychologist, and Haidt, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he co-wrote an article in the Atlantic about with Lukianoff? Greg, we'll call him Greg. And see, being unable to pronounce Lukianoff, being unable to pronounce that name right off the bat would be possibly considered a microaggression in some people's minds, but it wasn't. It was just my inability to pronounce names. But this article, I suggest you read it. It's very thought-provoking. But what I found it very interesting at the end was the common cognitive disorders list. And this list is pretty much the internet in a nutshell. And I found this very interesting because I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the feedback I get in a given week. And it pretty much every single one of these cognitive disorders, and I wish people would focus on these cognitive disorders, let's make this bigger, more than this ridiculous logical fallacy stuff. Apparently what people do is actually called a fallacy. But, you know, logical fallacies are now up there with the term privilege, and they're so overused and misused, they have lost their meaning on the internet. You know, it's up there with, there are so many terms that have just been so overused by one side or the other in the, you know, the outrage wars. That there's a film series for it. The Outrage Wars. Chapter 1, Diplomacy. Chapter 2, Fallacy. Chapter 3, I don't know, something else ended in E, so we can make it like the Divergent series. But could you imagine that? Outrage Wars. Maybe that's my shitty indie game that I'll make. And give it shitty graphics and write it like some emo teenager, and then various sites will give me 10 out of 10 and I'll win a bunch of fake awards. That was just a joke. It was a joke, right? Oh, right. That thing we're not allowed to make on the internet. This article deals with that. But yes, my shitty indie game that will never be made is Outrage Wars. But the common cognitive disorders, I think, is more useful for people to fixate on than these logical fallacy things, because these might actually help someone instead of making someone How do I put this diplomatically? I'm not good at diplomacy. Um, Instead of people being insufferable assholes in a vain attempt to sound smart, maybe these cognitive disorders might actually teach people a thing or two. Yes, I completely avoided diplomacy there. Um, why? Because I couldn't do it, and I admit that. And if anybody was offended by that, I apologize. Sometimes you just have to say things for clarity as opposed to padding everything against the feels. And that's what this article is about. But I'd like to quickly go through these common cognitive disorders because I do get them as part of feedback. And one in particular I get accused of a lot, and it's a complete mischaracterization of what I'm doing in these segments and what I do by responding to criticism. So maybe people will learn something about better internet debate and better internet discourse. So, number one, mind reading. You assume you know what people think without having sufficient evidence of their thoughts. He thinks I'm a loser. This has been going on for quite some time. Instead of examining actions, people jump to, well, he intended to, or she meant to, and she clearly wanted to. You don't know. You absolutely don't know. And the mind reading thing is the first thing that team building training disabuses you of. You get very tuned to going, but you think, oh wait, that's an assumption. What do you think? You know? And that the mind reading is so bad on the internet that if you ask someone a question, they treat it as an accusation. And this happened to me this week where someone said something that could be taken a few different ways. And this was not a person who I thought was a problem, hence them not being muted. But the thing they said sounded like potentially some sort of threat of social repercussions. And so I asked them, is that a threat? Well, they instantly made a rape joke, used a tag that, is going to cause trouble when you make a rape joke plus this tag, accused me of claiming I was threatening rape, accused me of saying that they were threatening rape, which was I was not doing. And then two of their friends jumped on me to explain to me why it was absolutely no way it was a threat. And my response was, no, could have sufficed as an answer. When someone asks you a question, guys, just answer it, okay? Don't try to read their minds, or the second one, fortune tell. This is a massive problem on the internet because you've got a lot of people with experiences with bullying. And when people feel threatened for a long period of time, they do tend towards false positives in terms of threat in their thinking. And this is natural. This is normal. And this is why I'm so big on trying to turn internet dialogues into something where trolling is not assumed. Because the problem is, if you assume trolling, you're going to see trolling where it's not there. And so I'm going to encounter trolls means either you're not going to try, or you're going to just go, he's a troll, and block yourself out from somebody who just might have phrased something wrong. And, I take a lot of flack from people who say you shouldn't engage. And I absolutely disagree. I would prefer not to assume that a person is trolling. I'll give them one or two responses in a tweet to see, to sort of suss them out. If they continue to act like a jackass after that, it's like, okay, they're either trolling or they're just not somebody who knows how to talk to people in a civilized fashion. Mute, goodbye. But I'm not going to assume right off the bat that's fortune telling. Catastrophizing is another major one that happens on the internet. And I think that catastrophizing and the second one, labeling, the fourth one, labeling, are two of the biggest reasons that outrage culture has taken over the internet. I think people are sweating the small stuff because they're so afraid that it's just the tip of the iceberg, and they catastrophize the impact of one article or one opinion or one stupid statement. You know, and this idea that they're going to take away this or they're going to take away that, or I'm going to be excluded and I won't be able to handle that if that happens. This is the last thing I have. The reality is, no, it's not. You know, the reality is, you know, I tell myself when I get too upset about anything involving video games, if there was another massive blackout or an EMP or something like that that knocked out all advanced technology, life would go on, okay? We'd go back to playing with sticks and rocks if we had to. People play. Video games are a glorious medium, but they're an expression of the human condition. They are in of themselves not something we need to survive, and that's what makes them amazing. Things like video games lift life above mere survival, and that's why they're wonderful. But the very thing that makes them wonderful is the fact that they are a luxury. And it's important to keep that in mind. I mean, there's people in places in the world who haven't even used a telephone, okay? So it's important to keep that in mind. Tea break, because tea is life. See, tea, I kind of need. But let's move on. Labeling, okay? This, again, you want to talk about, you know, outrage culture. Labeling is a huge part of outrage culture. And I'm starting to think that outrage culture is just cognitive errors. These guys have really made me think that maybe all this stuff, all this freaking out, is just a series of cognitive mistakes, cognitive assumptions that can be avoided. And labeling is a huge one. And I talked to numerous people this week about labeling, assigning global negative traits to people. Instead of, I disagree with you on this point, it's, you're an idiot, or you don't know what you're talking about, or some sweeping labeling of the person. And that is a line for me. I will debate someone on points. You know, there were people that said The Long Dark was terrible, right? The problem is that one of the criticisms people said of The Long Dark is it didn't have a story. It's a sandbox mode, folks. So in that case, I'd be like, your argument doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to say you're an idiot, you know? And this is something a lot of people think they are offering fair criticism, but they're prefacing it with this labeling of, you don't know what you're talking about, or you call yourself a gamer, or of course a feminist would say that. Take out the labels, guys. These things should be used as descriptors, not attacks. The minute you label someone that way, you're participating in identity politics. You're participating in ad hominems. And, you know, it actually is a cognitive mistake. You don't know people enough on the internet to know whether or not they are a good or bad person. You may have had a bad, you know, exchange with them. If you have a series of exchanges with them when they're an asshole and they go on to be assholes to other people, then you can go, I think he or she is an asshole. But you can't do that based on one exchange, right? It needs to be a pretty major pattern of behavior. And this actually is the entire concern I have with this article, because there are a few places where I know what they're saying, but it's not entirely clear. And because of, and that's not mind reading, it's, I know the scholarship they are basing some of their phrasings on, but I am concerned that some people will take what they're saying too literally, because one of the things they talk about is trigger warnings and helping people through trauma. And they're like, what we should be doing is helping people, instead of letting people avoid elevators, we should be helping people get over their fear of elevators. Well, you shouldn't be doing anything you're not trained for. And that should be a common sense thing. But common sense, because of these cognitive issues, is a rare thing on the internet. Because the thing about cognitive, as they call it, disorders, they're infectious. So let's keep going. Discounting positives. This is something I was accused of twice this week. And it baffled me. I do a video every week about finding your Zen. I, did a thing that I was mocked for, that I was like, yay, civil YouTube comments. I deliberately try to point out when I think somebody does good work, and I do my absolute best, based on the limitations of Twitter, to thank every single person that says something kind about me. But I have been accused of discounting positives, that I claim the positive things I or others do are trivial. That's so not true. The idea, that's what they're supposed to do. A lot of people do that. There's this whole issue with journalists right now. When we're ethical, we're just doing our jobs. When we're unethical, we get free promotion on a website. So the discounting positives are rampant right now, okay? When something is good, people say, well, I don't want to start a conversation by agreeing. That's awkward. That's discounting positives, okay? And it's a cognitive, as they call it, disorder. And discounting positives are rampant on the internet. And I get why. Because the next one, the negative filtering. The internet is one giant negative filter because of the trolling and because of the fortune telling regarding the trolling. If you're positive, that's something trolls can pick on, right? I remember this back from the Something Awful days, when the person that introduced me to Something Awful had this tendency to just run themselves down. And I asked them why, and they're like, well, that's what we're expected to do. If we have any sort of if you show any sort of confidence at all, the other trolls will lunge at you and tear that down. And you see it again and again and again and again. The negative filtering on the internet is so strong that people feel the need to take away any sort of identity and wrap themselves in anonymity, because they are predicting, they are fortune telling through negative filtering. They're only focused. And instead of saying, I don't have to take these negatives are not normal. Negatives have been normalized to the point that everything is through a negative filter. You want clicks on YouTube? Go negative. You want upvotes on Reddit? Go negative. You want people to pay attention to you? Go negative. Part of the reason this YouTube channel has not built the way I or anybody else would like it to is because I will not go negative, and I will not discount the positives on people. And that means it's going to grow slower, but it's going to grow in a more whole way. I won't have to keep topping myself in terms of, don't make that dirty, sick little monkeys. I don't have to keep one-upping myself in terms of gotta go after this person now. You're only as good as your next hit. And that's a real problem. This discounting positives and negative filtering makes it very difficult to do anything meaningfully affirming on the internet. People, I think, are almost afraid to embrace positive messaging. And then we get someone like PewDiePie, who people love to bash, but isn't that what PewDiePie does is so simple. I think that's why people have flocked to him and why he's been so successful. He had people building him up, yes, but I think that his brand was a positive sort of negative. Like, yeah, he was screaming like a girl and people loved to beat on him, but he wasn't going to say anything bad about anybody. And then he started bashing Nintendo and stuff like that. And it was like, what? What happened to PewDiePie? PewDiePie went negative. What? But that's okay. PewDiePie's still cool. See? Positives. 7, overgeneralizing. Massive on the internet. You see this on both sides of the culture war. Somebody's too cold at work. Biggest problem since women's suffrage, right? Shit like that is just stupid. It's just throwing absurdity into the argument so nothing can get done. And it happens all the time on the internet. It's a tactic. It's a hand grenade in a conversation. And people should be called out for it. Instead, they're rewarded for that sort of hyperbole. And then people want to talk about ethics and why we can't have debate. We want debate. Well, you have to cut out these cognitive issues, okay? You want debate? These cognitive errors are much more impactful on a debate than these logic fallacies that people love to throw around. Logic fallacies are rhetorical devices that may or may not be deliberate. These are actual ways people think that don't allow them to see the world the way it really is. That's why it's called a cognitive disorder. Okay? So let's step away from the logical fallacies and really focus on this stuff. And I'm sure people are going to freak at some of these because it involves changing the way you think. Yes, it does. The internet, as it is now, is an unhealthy place. There's a reason that so many people on it are depressed and have anxiety conditions. Because if you don't have one when you get on the internet, you sure do after a few months of people attacking you. The internet is a forced negative filter, right? And the internet sets everyone up to fail. So you get this overgeneralizing thing. The amount of failure that you have to deal with when you do anything professional on the internet is astounding. And this is something we need to factor in. Humans weren't set up to fail and 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 never get a win. You need that win. And we have this thing of, you have to keep going. You have to keep pushing through failure. That's not the way the human brain works. The human brain is like, that hurt. Don't do that, asshole. That's how negative feedback works in the body. So this idea of the internet that take a lot of shit and come back for more, it is the definition of inhuman. And then we move on to dichotomous thinking, which waste of time. It sucks. This is this 10 out of 10, 0 out of 10, okay? This dichotomous thinking, the problems we have with game reviews. I have never given a game a 10 out of 10 ever. And that means I'm not going to end up in publishers' marketing materials. But that's less important to me than someone reading the review and getting a false sense of the product. I can absolutely love a product, but if there is even one glitch that forces me to restart my system, and that happens in almost every game these days, and it's inexcusable. But if there are these, issues, if there are glitches, that game does not deserve a 10 out of 10. And I know there are websites, that work on a 5-star system are more difficult this way. A 5 out of 5 is different than a 10 out of 10 because a 5 out of 5 incorporates a 9 as well if they do not allow half marks. And the problem with a 5-star system is, it's like dress sizes. 8 to 10. Well, an 8 is not a 10, but we're stuck with that range. If you've only got 5 options, I can see somebody saying 5 out of 5 because that incorporates everything above 4, right? And do you want to give a game just an 8 when it deserves more than that? When 8 is sort of the basic recommended by this level? No. You want to say it's an excellent game. And that's why like a 10 point score with half points is probably the ideal one. But I think that a lot of 10 out of 10s in games are dichotomous thinking in the positive, but it's still dichotomous thinking. And you see this on the fan reviews or the user reviews on Metacritic all the time, right? 0 out of 10. Well, how? Like a 0 out of 10 is just as absurd as a 10 out of 10. And hey, maybe there are games that are flawless. Games used to be a lot more stable than they are now. They used to be a lot less complex too. But games used to be a lot more stable. So I can kind of understand like back then. And I learned from my English teacher that a perfect score, a 10 out of 10, because I actually got 100% in English once. Yeah, people like, that's not possible. Everybody makes mistakes. It wasn't about being flawless. It was about what we were expected to do at that grade level. Did I achieve and surpass that? But when somebody gets 100%, teachers are automatically reviewed. The grade is automatically reviewed in province of Ontario. And then rumors went around the school that I was sleeping with the teacher. That was awesome. Obviously it wasn't true, but it's left me with a sensitivity my entire life about accusations of my sex life. I achieved something amazing, and people immediately jump to the idea that I somehow did it dishonestly. Why? Because, people have these cognitive errors. And so while I can see in theory that a game could get 10 out of 10 without being flawless because of my past experiences, I don't think that bugs, especially full-blown crash, need a restart bugs, that shouldn't be acceptable in this day and age. That shouldn't be something we say is okay, right? We have to reward games that get the quality assurance right? And some of the greatest game studios I love, I recognize they ship buggy products, and that is going to, push down the score I give, because scores are for the people buying the game. And I know how frustrating it is to be on a big run and the game crashes. So I think, to summarize, because this is going really long, I think that games should be expected to run clean without crashes, especially on consoles that have hardware standardization and certification processes. If a game is crashing on a console, there's something wrong and it doesn't deserve a 10 out of 10. Why? Because it is not meeting the standards consumers expect. Fair enough? All right, hopefully that was clear. I'm sure I'll take some shit for that. Because number 9, blaming. People love to blame. Journalists are ruining gaming. Gamers are harassing people. Things like that. Not is this just overgeneralization. It's absolutely overgeneralization. But you're blaming somebody else for your problems. And this is difficult because there are certain societal issues that do affect people of certain groups more than others. It's still, let me be completely clear, it still sucks to be a black person in America, okay? And there's no denying that. So, well, never mind, some people do deny it, but, black people too often say, well, you just have a chip on your shoulder, or you're just blaming people for all your problems. No, that's not a case of blaming. What the cognitive error is, you're feeling bad. Well, you feel bad because you feel bad, and there could be reasons for that. But when you switch to, I'm blaming you for my bad mood, or I'm blaming you for making me feel bad, the problem is you get stuck. You get stuck because if you're giving the power over your mood to another person, you cannot get out of that bad mood. You're hinging it on them, right? To make it better. And we've seen this for the last freaking year, haven't we? On both sides. Oh God, this guy was accused of something. Blame him for all the social ills. This person wrote an article that was not well thought out. Let's blame her for everything that's going wrong with gaming. Blaming is a cognitive disorder. Don't take my word for it. It's here, folks. At some point, you have to decide that that person or that group of people is not going to have power over you and walk away. I've had to do it. It's part of growing up. But if you're going to give another person that much control over your thinking, it is disordered thinking, hence cognitive disorder. Number 10, what if? This is happening a lot. People tend to slippery slope arguments. But what if the publishers listen? But what if it changes the game? Well, it might. And you know what? Then it's not well received. And the developer goes, yeah, we went too far in that direction. And they fix it the next time. Nobody's going to take away our games. We won that fight. Games are protected speech under the First Amendment in the U.S. And yes, people in other countries are having more issues with game censorship. Places like Australia and, apparently Germany has some issues as well. But Australia has a lot of sociopolitical problems. I mean, based on what I read from the news, this is the tip of the iceberg. And does that mean it shouldn't be addressed? No, it should be addressed. But the reality is that places that are censoring games have, much more deeply rooted issues that are allowing that thinking to take hold. And if you address, that over politicized knee-jerk thinking, you're going to clear up the censorship as well. And yes, granted, you have to watch censorship to clear up the knee-jerk thinking. However, you can't spend your entire life afraid of what's going to happen because Grand Theft Auto gets pulled from one store, right? If Target won't sell Grand Theft Auto, go buy it from another store. Don't spend all your time what-ifing if all the stores can't sell Grand Theft Auto. Deal with that when we come to it. It's that we'll cross that bridge, right? Because if you keep, but what if, you get stuck. You're never going to move forward because you're so afraid of what's going to happen. You're not living in the now. Go buy Grand Theft Auto somewhere else. It's still there. It's just not at Target. I think it was Target. Could have been Walmart, but one of those big stores. I don't buy my games from those big stores because I think they have too much power. That's what I'm doing now. I'm not going to sit here worrying because that's a waste of time and energy. And then we get to emotional reasoning. By the time you've done all these other cognitive things, you are so emotionally overwrought. You cannot think logically. You can't. There's too much going on. So all your emotions become real to you. And emotions are exceptionally valid if you keep it in scope, if you are constantly checking in and saying, why am I feeling this way? And the problem is that people like to go, oh, you're emotional, invalid. That's a form of emotional reasoning as well. Because a rational person recognizes that someone is being emotional and reach out with kindness. If you're the rational person and someone else is emotional, you're in control and they're not. The minute you start feeding off the other person's emotional freakout, you too are emotional. So I know someone's not disconnected emotionally from something when they start complaining about somebody else's emotions. Now, that's not entirely what this means, but it's something to think about. because I know when I'm not connected to something, it's like, yeah, they can freak out all they want. Doesn't affect me. But when I am invested in something, the freak out is annoying. It happened to me this week that they criticized someone for being emotionally driven and irrational. And then they told me they were insulted because, well, I won't get into it, but, I said, well, being insulted is an emotional response. That thing you've said is irrational. And then they came out with the most ridiculous accusation that was basically, demonizing me. What was it further up? Like, it was a startling example of discounting positives, negative filtering, labeling. It was like run down the list. Because the thing about these cognitive disorders is there isn't usually just one. Okay, there's usually a bunch of them, and this emotional reasoning tends to be, as I said, a symptom of the other 10. You don't go to emotional reasoning right away. Emotional reasoning is, something else is broken down the line. And that's why, I had a really bad day yesterday. I had to step back and go, why am I so upset? And I realized that it was me responding to other people having cognitive issues about me, jumping to conclusions, accusing me of things. And it wasn't so much that, but that it put me in a position of me having to wonder, am I going to have to walk away from work I enjoy because the people involved are not cognitively sound? And that's difficult. And that put me in a really lousy mood. But I own that mood, okay? That doesn't mean I'm going to be sweetness and light, because the other thing I own is I don't play the nice game. And I am going to tell you straight. I am going to tell you what I think. If something is bugging me about what you're doing, I'm going to tell you. Why? Because I'm not going to blame you for my problems if I don't speak up and tell you what my issue is. If I don't tell you what my issue is, if I hold that in, that's on me, not the other person. And life's too short for blame. But I'm backing up because number 12 is the hardest one to kind of understand. And there's going to be a ton of this in response to this video. And that's not what ifing. This is human nature, okay? Because inability to disconfirm is you reject any evidence or arguments that might contradict your negative thoughts. And this is because positive thoughts are scary, and they use these, unlovable thing, which I'm always like, oh, you always gotta go there. There are some times where you have to just say, this sucks. This is not intended to Pollyanna stuff. And that's one of those things about tea break. About these, even these are going to get used as weapons because of people rejecting any evidence or arguments that might change their minds. And this is societal conditioning. I am convinced, because we have this term now, flip-flopper. You can't change your mind. You can't rethink something. You can't evolve. You're a flip-flopper, right? And that makes people dig in. And it takes more energy for most people to be positive and negative than negative. So they start negative and they stay negative because it's easier to stay negative than to stay positive, because positive is an up, negative is a down. And when you're up, people spend a lot of time and effort pulling you down. Now, that's why change is so important. That's why going, all right, maybe it's not so bad, or, maybe I need to think about this differently, or let's come at this. The problem is now we live in a world where something you said 10 years ago is brought up to refute a statement you make now. So we're forcing people into a negative apathetic public positioning so they're never disconfirmed. And we need to stop that because that's not giving us the best ideas. You know, I mean, there are some funny statements by tech giants like Bill Gates saying you'll never need more than 64K. Okay, yeah, I was big wrong on that. But are we gonna, go, well, the Xbox sucks because Bill Gates said you'll never need more than 64K of RAM? No. Like, that's silly. But people are so obsessed with consistency because it's one of the persuasive tools. We'll deal with the powers of persuasion another day. But people are so obsessed with consistency, of being consistent. The internet never forgets. We archive. That's what we do. We're watching you. That people are discouraged from changing anything that might contradict their negative thoughts. So we have an entire way of communicating that encourages cognitive disorders. And that's not me saying these are cognitive disorders. These are people who know what they're talking about, moral psychologists and people with backgrounds in psychology and all this stuff. I didn't make this up. I'm just reading it. It's on the internet. You can see the website. Go for it. Read it yourself. I highly recommend reading this article. But this does need to change, and it's not going to come from the powers that be. This is going to be a ground up thing. This is going to be your own social group. You put your own things in. I am not going to talk to people like that. I am not going to respond this way. I am not going to troll. Because trolling is a cognitive error. Okay? And we cannot allow a massive, powerful, populist communication tool that gives voice to the voiceless to become dysfunctional because we are forcing cognitive disorders on people en masse. So for those of you who like to predict or like to mind read or what if what I'm doing, that's on you, not me. That problem is with your reasoning. I can ask you to stop. I can't make you. But it's very unfortunate that you would shut out someone with good intentions and has something to say and who cares about gaming just as much as you do because of your own faulty thinking. So I implore everybody over the weekend to kind of examine this and think about, even if you change one thing, it makes it better. You don't have to do this all at once. And I think lists of 12 things, it's daunting, right? And part of the reason I have been able to sort of listen to other people's emotions is, I've done this work. There are a lot of people that haven't done this work because, the whole trigger warning debate is just blaming other people for the bad shit that happened to you that they didn't cause. And that, that doesn't mean we should force people to relive traumas because, God, people made me do that and it sucked. I was messed up for a week afterwards. I'm not saying that, but I want to get back into things. I want to re-engage with things. And I'm sick of the assholes not letting me do it because they're so invested in negativity. Well, negativity is a cognitive disorder.